Good Monday to you. I don't even know if this is going to go out on Monday, to be realistic. It might end up going out on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Friday. Maybe you listen to this on a Monday, but it went out on a Friday. Who knows? Either way, good Monday. CE Podcast. Your host, Joe Martino. Hope you're having a good day. Going to be talking about an interesting topic today. We're going to be getting into why hasn't the world changed yet? And when I say that, what do I mean? I mean, you know, people hear all the time. If you've been in this space of consciousness, of exploring the shift that's taking place, of exploring truth and what's happening with a lot of these movements and the various things of literally over the past, you could say even like 10 to 15 years that have really come forward into humanity's collective consciousness about various, what you call conspiracies or all these different things. So much is being uncovered. And people keep asking the question, okay, but then why hasn't the world changed yet? Okay, but if everyone knows this stuff now, or if people are starting to really know, why hasn't the world changed yet? And we're going to be talking about an interesting factor that pretty much is, at least in my opinion, from what I've seen, is barely talked about out there. And yet it's a huge factor, huge. And it's interesting because we also understand this factor, and I'm keeping some mystery here, but we understand this factor when we look at things like quantum physics and we look at, the way consciousness functions and so forth, but we forget to apply it to what's actually happening in our physical world sometimes. This is really going to come down to our consciousness. What humanity's consciousness is ultimately ready for is how things play out in a physical world and on the planet. And this is kind of one of those whoa moments, because we're like, okay, well, wait a minute. I thought quantum physics told us that, what our consciousness projects is what, starts to play out in the physical world and what we start to see. And it's like, well, yes, absolutely, to some extent. But there's also this thing called collective consciousness, which takes into consideration the entire collective's consciousness and the world that we're projecting as it relates to what we need to be experiencing for the very purpose that we're here, which is growth, which is to enrich and to experience through the physicality and basically enrich our soul's knowing, our soul's experience, our soul's understanding of what it can create and what we can create as a collective and as a source consciousness, right? We literally are in what is like, not to marginalize it, but is literally like a game, right? We're playing a game. We have roles, we have people set up, and we're playing a game here. And we're going to get into this whole topic. We're going to dive into it. We're going to explore some very specific and key details with regards to how a lot of this stuff functions and what plays out and what the elite's role in it. We're going to talk about Trump. We're going to talk about free energy. We're going to get into UFOs a little bit because these are some of the hottest topics, and there's so much confusion and there's so much what do we make of Trump going on out there? And all of this, what do we make of Trump talk, is so easy to really look at, explore, and explain when you break it down to the simplicity of it. But we don't, because we either typically look at it from a left-right point of view, right? One political side or another, or we look at it from he's either, pure working for the deep state or he's not pure working for the deep state. And when in reality, there's way more to this topic. And this is why, and I'm going to keep saying, I feel like a broken record. Saying this, but this is why CE Media, what we're doing, conscious media, is so important, because we're not looking at just the basic, okay, so what's happening from the conspiracy side? Okay, what's happening from this political side? We're looking at it and we're applying it to humanity's consciousness and humanity's, journey that we're on here. And if you don't do that with the media, if you don't look at what's happening in the world and include the factor of why it impacts humanity's consciousness, you're going to get stuck in emotions, you're going to get stuck in sides, you're going to get stuck in a limited view of what's going on. We produce the media we produce because we're saying, hey, let's blow the doors off of what we think is possible, what we think is going on in our world, right? We blow those doors off, shoot them off. Here we go, right? That's what this is about. So before we dive into this topic deeply, I want to talk a little bit about something that does relate to this, but it's a hot topic right now, and it's something, again, that people are asking a lot of questions. There's a ton of different stuff online. Won't go like super into it here, but the Time magazine cover, I believe it's coming out on July 2nd. And this Time magazine cover, they already released the story. And if you haven't seen the cover yet, there's an image of Trump on the right-hand side looking down at a crying child on the left-hand side. And it's a big red cover and, Time magazine up at the top. And it says, "Welcome to America," I believe is the tagline. And, the whole story that went along with this that was initially posted on Time magazine's website was talking about how, this girl was stopped at the border and she was taken and put in cages and stripped away from her mother and all these different things. They made this really dramatic story, and the whole purpose of it was they were trying to really point fingers and attack the Trump administration for what they were doing and all that sort of stuff. And that's all fine if the story's true and you wanna say, hey, this is going on. There's nothing wrong with that. Like in the sense of, if that's, if you're trying to tell a story, that's all cool, right? It doesn't, most of mainstream media is telling their stories from a massive bias, one side or another, from a political point of view. The problem is it came out this story was false. And the little girl that you see crying in the image was actually just crying because, she was tired and needed to go home and hadn't slept, and her mother was right there, and her father even came forward and said, no, this didn't happen like this. And of course, Time magazine then had to release an apology stating, hey, oops, sorry, this was a, fake story. We our mistake, but we're going to run the cover anyway, because we feel that the image perfectly captures what the problem is that is happening at the border that we need to bring attention to. And in that, you not only realize the lunacy of what's happening inside corporate mainstream media, but you realize, if you think a little bit deeper, you realize what's really happening here. And it's happening in a really good way. Really, really, this is a fantastic thing that's taking place. What's happening is, back in, and we called this, you can go back 2 years ago when the election first took place, and we had said, or I can speak for myself, I specifically wrote an article talking about how this fake news thing that was created, obviously inside the elite, this fake news thing, which is initially came through this professor at some university, and they put out this list of quote unquote fake news websites or websites that, are involved in clickbait content and so forth. Right. And this blew up into mass media, and nowhere on there did you see any of the corporate media, any of the heavily slanted, politically biased media. You saw nothing. You only saw independent media sources or satirical websites or legitimately poor websites that are producing fake news. Now, if they limited this list to just the limited few really, really bad obvious websites where they're trying to create fake news, then that would have been fine. It would have been like, okay, clearly all they're trying to do here is stop some of these websites from creating very, very insanely obvious fake news. But they included a ton of websites on this, most of which were not fake news at all. And even if they've posted one or two fake news stories, the other 95% of their content's probably totally fine. And then it begs this question of okay, so even if, say, someone like Alex Jones, who was on that list, we were on the list for a different category, which we'll get to in a second, but Alex Jones and even Natural News were on the list for legitimately fake stories. Even if they were on that list for that reason, you got to think, and they made a few mistakes here and there. Okay, well, why isn't Time Magazine? Why isn't Washington Post? Why isn't CNN? Who've all made big mistakes and had to put out stories saying, apologies, retractions, where they say, sorry, this was actually a fake fact. We were wrong about this, and here's an update. Why are they not on the list as fake or spreading fake narratives or false narratives, right? We don't even need to get into the fact that none of mainstream media covered 9/11 correctly. We don't even need to get into that factor, thus making them all, fake news outlets. But let's let's put that aside for a second. Let's look at, this whole list. And the list happens to come out from this professor at the exact same time. And I have a graph that shows this. I wrote the article back in 2016. I put it out on collectiveevolution.com. I wrote the article. It said, here is the exact decline in reach that our Facebook page experienced, along with a number of our friends' Facebook pages, right as this fake news propaganda stuff starts to come out from this quote-unquote professor who made a list of fake news websites. So how is it that there's a coordinated effort between Facebook and this professor literally the same week that the news starts to hit? How is that even possible? And so what I went on to talk about in this article, and what relates to this Time Magazine stuff that everybody's up in arms over and everything, all this stuff going on, but I want us to step back for a second and have a look here. But what I had said in the article was that this fake news thing was going to backfire immensely. And why I said that was because when you look at things from a collective consciousness perspective, and you understand that what we're going through now is very, very different than what we've gone through in previous decades. Therefore, when we think to ourselves, because a lot of times we'll come up with a thing, saying, well, Joe or whoever's giving an example, 10 years ago, the elite was able to, even let's say 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the elite was able to lie and it never backfired. And it doesn't backfire all the time. Well, why is it backfiring now? And it goes into the topic we're going to talk about today, which is why hasn't the world changed? It didn't backfire then because humanity wasn't, from a consciousness level, from a shift level, saying we are super ready to start seeing the deep truths of everything that's going on. Instead, we were still very much, head to the ground, just kind of living our life in the machine, just doing our thing inside the matrix. Whereas now, from a collective consciousness level, not only have many, many, many more people started to wake up and see through the illusion, but at the same time, we're on this hyper-tracked journey of speeding up this entire thing. Some people call it the quickening. Some people call it, some form of ascension or something like this. Some people call it the shift in consciousness, which is the way we talk about it and the way we decide to define it. Made a whole film on this, Collective Evolution 3, The Shift. And the whole point of the film was to look at, from a scientific, from a cosmological, from a ancient history, from a what's happening now perspective of what is actually taking place as it relates to this shift in consciousness, and why now is a much more ripe time than we've ever seen for something like this to take place. And therefore, we cannot use the happenings or the way the elite operated, 20, 30 years ago as a means to say, oh no, we got to debunk everything happening today based on what they did back then. It's a different landscape. It's a completely different time. We got to stop living in the past. We got to look at now. Utilize some of the wisdom we've taken, but use it looking at what's actually happening now, tap into the energy of what's happening now, and really utilize your intuition to explore what is taking place. Again, this is what conscious media is about, right? It's about diving deep in this manner. And so when we talk about this fake news thing backfiring, what we're really saying is, and this is, again, I outlined this in the article, is that because fake news was such a big focus now, because everyone was saying, oh my God, that's a fake news story. That's a fake news. How many people said it was fake news, all this Clinton stuff that was coming through WikiLeaks? Everyone was like, oh, fake news, that's fake news, that's fake news, that's fake news, right? And that was the narrative that was trying to be pushed. Not only was it real news and it was true, but what started to happen is you started to realize that these big media companies were actually producing fake stories, or stories that they ended up like having to turn back on or flip around, or oops, like we made a mistake here. All of a sudden, they were at the brunt of a lot of the fake news accusations, because not only had they jumped on the term, made it a huge thing and said, oh my God, this is the biggest thing in the world. So they popularized and created a trend of this whole fake news thing. But then it backfired, because now everybody's looking out for fake stories, and they're kind of saying, hey, you know what, if we can sort of disprove something here, then we should actually try and look at it and think a little bit more deeply about it, which people did. And when people start thinking deeply about mainstream media, what happens? They start to see through the illusion. They start to see the lies. They start to see the manipulation. They start to see what's going on. Now, all of a sudden, 2 years after this whole fake news mumbo jumbo that they created, the people hurting the most is mainstream media. Why? Because they made everybody pay really close attention to what they're reading or listening. And then they started to realize how many faults there are in the bias, the narratives, the facts, all these different things that go on inside mainstream media. And sure, there are probably a few alternative media outlets that are suffered as a result and that had some scrutiny as a result. And in a sense, if they're telling fake stuff as well, they should be scrutinized in the sense of people should say, hey, you know what? I don't believe this is true. Let's talk about this. But it backfired on the mainstream media. And when we go, okay, so why is this all happening? Let's go back to collective consciousness again, right? Why hasn't the world changed yet? Well, first of all, the world is changing. That's first of all, right? The world is changing. But if we look at this from a collective consciousness perspective, we're seeing that humanity's consciousness is ready to begin to see certain elements of certain things. To this fake news thing, the media, from a big picture perspective, you got to think beyond the agendas of the human mind. And let's tap into the soul here. Let's tap into collective consciousness. Let's tap into the bigger game that's taking place. Right? So if you have the ego, you have the mind, which is where the agendas take place, which is where the lies, the manipulation, all that stuff takes place. And then you have the soul, which is this different aspect of who we are. This is our true essence of who we are. It's involved in the game. It's playing. It's creating this us versus them experience, not from a judgmental point of view, but to say, oh, let's see what it feels like to go play us versus them. To blah, blah, blah. Let's go see what that's like, which we've been doing for a very long time, which the soul is ready to evolve and move beyond, which is what we've been feeling for a very long time, which is why so many of us are saying, hey, okay, it's time to change the game. I can feel it. It's time to awaken. It's time to change the game. And we're getting this urgency, right? So all that's going on. But again, from the mind level, where the agendas are created, we create all this fake news stuff. Oh, the media, okay, let's go do all this attack. Let's go shut down alternative media. Let's go blah, 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 blah. But that's also happening. And the soul says, yeah, let's go do that. Because that's going to help awaken people. It's going to backfire. The soul knows that. So yeah, go do it. It's going to backfire and people are going to start to awaken because that's what we want to do. And so that starts to take place. And so again, it's like when we take the emotions out of it and we stop looking at, stupid mainstream media, it's all backfiring on them. Losers, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff that we sometimes get caught up in. Right? Which is fine. It's like, it is comical that it's backfiring on them. Let's not kid ourselves here. It's funny to watch it happen because here's you got someone who's trying so hard to portray this specific image, always pointing the finger at everybody else. And at the same time, now it's all happening and the point finger is sort of going back at them. And it's like, maybe you need to check into what's actually going on, right? We get who really owns these companies, what's really happening. Maybe these anchors start to question, wait, why am I spouting this stuff? And it starts to happen. But at the end of the day, this whole fake news thing, which again, I said, and a lot of people in alternative media were panicked. I said, it shouldn't matter. What matters is you keep doing what you authentically need to do and you keep living deeply in that truth. The censorship can only go so far because we're in a shift. There's a shift in consciousness happening. And the quote unquote elite cabal, all these different things are, they're not going to win, as we call it. Because that's not what we're going through. We're going through a shift beyond that. We're going to see what's going on and we're going to shift beyond that, shift our consciousness, step into who we truly are, step into our power, and step into a world where we're creating abundance. That's what we're working towards. That's what's happening. But in order to do that, we need to start really diving into that state of being. And we will only see on this planet, physically, stuff take place that is, we'll say, just one little step ahead of what humanity is ready to see. Because that one little step allows us to continue to expand our boundaries of what we think we are and is possible little by little by little. And now this is happening a little bit more slowly because a lot of us are not really diving into, let's really expand our consciousness. Let's really start letting go of stuff. Let's really start to question. Let's not limit our possibility to, okay, we got to move beyond, the current economic system. So, we got to remove the Federal Reserve. And so instead of just having this sort of centralized banking, we'll have decentralized banking. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, let's just do that. Oh, wait a minute. Why do we need banking at all? Why do we need currency? Why do we need exchange? Why do we need to play in a world where there's people have this and people don't have that? And, we need to go buy our food and we need to go buy our houses. And this is my little plot of land. You can't come here and you can't touch this and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Why is that the limit to what we can do? Humans are only capable of, you know what? We'll just decentralize and it'll be fine. No. And this is why, people question, why are we not seeing, why is free energy not out? Why is Trump in power? Is he deep state? Is he not deep state? What's going on? UFOs. How come there hasn't been worldwide disclosure yet? How come the ETs haven't come down and landed and shown themselves to everybody? Why hasn't this stuff happened yet? Why isn't the world changing? Why is it taking so long? What are we waiting for? Well, think for a second or feel for a second. Better yet. ETs land on the planet. How do people react? Think of the religious people. Think of the highly scientific people. Think of the people that are atheists. Think of all these different people. How do they react? How does the average person who, maybe not even falls into one of those categories per se, but just the average, how do they react? Are they scared? Are they excited? Are they happy? What's the reaction? We don't know, but just feel it out. Same situation with let's say free energy. Someone comes forward. Okay, I got a free energy device. Here it is. It's available. It's working. I've already mass produced 10 million of them. They're sitting in the factory over there. What happens? Think about what you see happening in today's world with humanity's consciousness, where it's at today. And these are the questions that we got to ask ourselves when we ask ourselves, why isn't the world changing? And this is what goes back to the whole thing of why change starts within, which has been our message from day one. Change starts within, and why we need to shift our consciousness. Everybody's talking about, just go create external solutions. Just go fix that over there. Go fix that problem over there. But we can Band-Aid fix things and just fix it for a short little period of time and then it'll break again. Or we can shift our consciousness. And guess what? That'll start to project a world that really is the world we want to move towards. We have to shift our consciousness in this whole journey. It has to happen, right? So again, we start getting caught up in this whole idea of feeling like, nothing's ever changing. All this technology that's being suppressed. There's aspects to the suppression that are physical and that are built by the cabal. And the elite is legitimately, they are suppressing some of these technologies. It's happening. But the reality is, if humanity shifts enough, and if we work towards really opening ourselves up to possibility and spreading this message worldwide and really getting everybody to really start questioning, what world do we really want to live in? I kind of want to go from paying $10 for energy to $8, and I'll be happy. So instead of just settling for, really we're just trying to make a baby step. Well, guess what? You keep making baby steps. We keep building our consciousness to just think about these small little confines all the time, which is we've been trained to do. That's been part of our training through education system, through media, through all this sort of stuff. If you limit our confines to that, then things will change slowly. It'll take really long time for anything to come out. We'll never see free energy because these things will come out when humanity's consciousness is ready. Plain and simple. And there's a lot of people, many people that I'm friends with, that I discuss a lot of things with, that understand this, that have access to these technologies, but they're not going to come. They're not going to come out because we're not at a point where it's there. And it's okay, well, who's going to decide that? Nobody's deciding that. Nobody's we're not ready, so we're not going to do this yet. No, it's not about that. You can't feel it. You can't see it. It's not there because we're still in this mentality of, okay, well, if it comes out, then we got to own and control and make billions of dollars off of these free energy devices so that, we can be in control. And yes, we won't pollute the planet because, that's the most important part, is that we don't pollute the planet. First off, CO2 is not the problem for climate change. That's a whole nother podcast. We can go on all day about that one. That is fake news 101. It is not the problem. That is a massive, massive lie Huge. And there is so much incredible science behind that. It's unbelievable. The bunk science, the bad science that develops policy is what tells you that CO2 is the problem. So don't get caught up in that one. Research that one. Dive into that one. Pollution is the issue when it comes to energy right now. Pollution. You have these, and obviously enslavement. But these companies are polluting like crazy. Let's move away from CO2 for a second. Look what they're pumping into the environment. Look how much they're destroying the land as we dig everything up for natural gas and for all these different things. Look at how many toxins and carcinogens end up in our environment, in our air. No one talks about that. Oh, we just talk about CO2, which is not the problem. And that's how you know it's an illusion, it's a lie. Because instead of talking about the very obvious problem that we should be challenging companies to stop and to shift and to fix, instead we're caught up in this carbon credits and CO2 and stopping this because it's going to warm the atmosphere. Look at the records and the data available. CO2 does not warm the atmosphere, period. Period. We got to stop that whole thing. But besides, so again, that's an illusion being created to move us away from the legitimate problem, which is pollution, and push us over into this. So again, we're going to have these free energy devices come out, and it's going to stop pollution, and it's going to, stop this whole CO2 problem, and it's going to do it. Yeah, it's great. Let's stop the pollution. But what's going to happen? Are we then going to still limit that energy and pay people to use it and do this and do that? Is it going to be open source? Is someone going to control it and own it and patent it and then say, no, this is mine. This is my patent. This is my idea. You can't touch this. You can't have this. What world does that come from? What level of consciousness does that come from? Oh, but we're supposed to have our ideas, and our idea is important, and we should get credit for them. Sure, fine. Hey, this guy created this. This is great, beautiful. But does that mean we then go from giving credit to something, which is, in a lot of cases, it still doesn't really matter. But if you're contributing to something to humanity as a whole, and it's helping to create a thriving population for humanity, I don't really think credit is like the end result of what we're going for here. But at the end of the day, it's like we bring these technologies forward. What do we really have? We have if we keep it open, if we allow people to use it, we allow people to have it, we allow it to be there, without all these old world patents, right? 3D level of consciousness. I own this is mine. Nobody else can have this. Nobody else can touch this. And we apply these old world mentalities to the new world. We ask ourselves, why hasn't the world changed yet? Well, we're still looking at the solutions that we're getting inspired to come up with, and we're applying old world consciousness to them. Oh yeah, we should create green energy. Let's find the most profitable way to create green energy. What is this? Right? It's always the old world stuff. Oh, we have to figure out a way to maintain the economy while we do all this stuff. Why? Why does it always have to be about the economy? Why does it always be? And I know this, like, you're probably listening to this, or you're looking at me on YouTube, and you're like, this guy's nuts. This guy's his consciousness, his ideas of what's going to happen here. He's even living in some utopia. This is crazy. There's no possible way. This is, you got to come back down to earth. Think economics here. Think, education system. Think, how are things going to work? How are things going to function? What about jobs? Yeah, and I'm asking you to say, what about all that stuff? Let's step out for a second and say, hold on. The human story has been one way for a period of time. We have the opportunity at any moment in time to start saying, we created this whole thing. We can uncreate it and create something new. We're ignoring that opportunity, and we're saying, we created this thing that's enslaving all of us, and a specific group of people really helped to push this in this place. And now we're in it. And now we feel the only way out is to make tiny little baby steps to get out. And because we believe that, our consciousness defines that as our reality. And we start seeing these slow, tiny little, shifts that take place over, a period of time. I'm playing with my pen here. We see these things and they take forever. And then we believe, that's just part of the way humanity's consciousness works and evolves. It just takes a long time. But it doesn't have to. It's just, we're not dreaming. We're not inspired. Like, how many people have you seen come up with an incredible dream mission, this undertaking that's huge, And it happens seemingly overnight. Why? Because they didn't let their own mind get in the way. They just went and created it. Bingo bango. Right? We create our limitations. You have to go on YouTube or look it up, whatever it may be. There's a scientist who put a flea in a jar and put a lid on the jar, and the flea jumped, hit its head on the lid, obviously. Well, first off, I've already ruined this analogy. So the scientist put a flea in the jar, the flea jumps out of the jar, right? Because, it has the ability to do so. The flea can easily jump out of the size of the jar that it had put in, right? And this is a real experiment that was done. Then place the lid on the jar, flea jumps, hits it. Flea jumps, hits it. Starts to realize, okay, that's where my limitation is, and starts jumping just below it hits its head. So it's like, okay, that's my limitation now. I don't want to hit my head anymore. And then the scientist removes the lid off the jar, and all of a sudden, the flea continues to jump at the exact same height before it would hit its head. Meanwhile, the jar is open. It has the ability to get out. It has the ability to fully be outside the jar, free of this, I guess you could say, prison or limitation that's on it. But it has been so trained and so, stuck in the limitation based on hitting its head one time that it does not want to see or understand what's outside of the limitation that had been placed. And this exact same thing is happening to humanity, and people are not wanting to apply it to the way we look at, we're okay in applying it to the way we look at our career. That's a big thing right now, the whole entrepreneur movement. Everyone's like, yeah, you know what, my limitations, I'm capable of going and making $1 million. Why was I told I could only make like 40 grand a year? I could make $1 million. And we're okay with applying it to career. But we're not okay applying it to, should we have, people who don't have food and shelter on the planet? Should we really have to have a political system that doesn't work at all and just keep voting and keep giving up our power to that? Do we really need to be going to the education system as it is today, or could it evolve and change? And what could that really look like? What could our society really look like? And we place these limits. Yes, part of them are, it's like the elite will come in and say, hey, here's a limit. You can play with this. And then we go, okay, yeah, we'll get used to that limit. Okay, yeah, this is our limit, right? Meanwhile, it's like you look up and you're like, I actually see something beyond that limit. But you know what? Forget it. I'm going to keep staying down here because I see it. I see that I can do something different, but it kind of seems uncomfortable. So I'm just going to kind of keep my head down. And then we wonder why the world doesn't change. So then what we do is we say, oh, I read how to get out of the jar. The flea goes and reads a book and says, yeah, I understand, there's an elite, there's a cabal, and I read, that they're there and they did this to me. But yet we don't shift our consciousness to move out of the anger state. We stay angry, we stay upset, and we stay stuck down in the bottom of the jar. Instead, what we could do is be like, yeah, you know what? It was cool. That's what they did. You know what? I'm going to jump out of this jar. I'm going to go tell other people. We're going to figure this out. And then we're going to create a world of full possibility. Because guess what? Outside this jar, huge possibility. Anything we want to create, we can create. Humanity is incredible at building, incredible at creating things together, incredible at organizing. We like to tell the story that everybody's crazy and messed up and no one loves each other and everyone's not, because that's the story that keeps us divided. We love to tell that story. This guy's a psycho. This guy's crazy. This person's that. This person's that. Whatever. We love that because we've been trained in that forever. And there's crazy people all around the world. When in reality, the amount of people that are actually operating from that state is probably small, very small. And the more of us that actually get on the train of shifting our consciousness, of opening up and questioning what is really possible, and being okay, being open to the possibility that, hey, it doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't have to be this small little inch step forward, but it could be something much more grand, and we can continue to work towards that grandness. Maybe we take small steps like cryptocurrency and we say, hey, this is a small step in decentralizing. And as we continue to decentralize and move power structure away from these, limiting centralized banking systems that are enslaving the population through debt, instead of that, we say, yeah, okay, this is a temporary step forward. And then, when we're ready, 10, 15 years from now, we're going to realize, hey, We don't even need exchange. We don't even need these cryptocurrency. We don't need them, right? But it's a temporary means. It's a bridge to get us from one space to another. And that's fine. And that's cool. But remember not to cage ourselves again, right? And that's what this is about. So when we talk about why hasn't the world changed, we're only seeing what humanity's consciousness is ready to see to push it forward just enough that we're ready for it. And that we can, that we can keep moving forward just a little bit. So we're in control of that, of how much things change. And when we say, oh yeah, but I can't control other people. But yeah, you can control yourself. So do as much as you can within yourself and then inspire that message into others and it will continue to spread. But if we don't do that, and if we're not taking action ourselves, how can we expect anybody else to? Right? We ask the question, why is Trump in power? We were just talking about this in our office earlier today. Trump's the president of the United States because Trump's the right man from a consciousness perspective. Man, woman, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't even matter. He's the right person to be in place for right now. That's why he's there. It's that simple. He's going to kick the hornet's nest. He's going to disrupt some of what's been going on in the old regime for a long time. He's going to bring a lot of different, pissy moments forward for people. He's going to show people, hey, is this really what we want to be doing? Like, because I don't know if you've listened to him speak. He's not the most eloquent or, respectful type person all the time. Is that who we want to give our power away to run a country, right? This doesn't mean Trump's good or bad. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that I think it's clear that he is disrupting the old deep state. That is evident. That is clear. But there are other means by which, he's the right person in a sense, because he needs to relate to mass consciousness in a sense. And in order for these changes, right? If he is in fact working to, dismantle some of the elite pedophile rings, for example, imagine you had a super conscious person that was, speaking all eloquently all the time and talking about collective consciousness and all that sort of stuff, speaking as the president of the United States. Like, most people are going to be like, what the heck is this guy even talking about, or woman? What is this person talking about in general? Like, what is this? Whereas you have him, people are like, yeah, I can relate to this guy. I get it. I see it, blah, blah, blah. And he starts slowly breaking things down because that's what humanity's ready for. So it comes down to consciousness. It comes down to how much we shift and how much we're willing to shift and how much we're willing to work towards this stuff. And yes, how that looks is spreading and sharing information, alternative news, independent media that gives people different perspectives. The other side to it is getting us to question something much bigger as we go through this, expanding our way of thinking, our consciousness, and what we believe is possible, not only for ourselves, but for our world. Ask the questions, expand, explore, see where you set up your own limitations, see where you set up casted limitations on society. Explore that, and then open that up and believe, you know what? This really is possible. We can do this, and really explore these things and have conversations around that. Have conversations as if we're kids and we believe everything is possible. Because that's the reality, is that everything is possible. We can't say that there's infinite potentiality based on what we see in, even spiritual stuff, and then what we see through looking at quantum physics, where everything is possible until the moment we define it. We can't say there's infinite possibility and then turn around and say, yeah, but we're stuck to this system. That's the illusion. Watch the movie The Matrix, right? Neo has a really tough time because he doesn't believe, because he's been trained so hard. Then once he really steps outside and expands his consciousness, he can jump from one building to another. And then he starts to realize, wow, there's a lot of things that are possible here that I never thought was possible. And then when you start to realize that, all of a sudden the agents, i.e. the elites, the deep state, don't have control over you anymore. Can't manipulate you anymore. Then you're able to work towards creating a world that is good for everybody, and that we can make this happen, and we can continue to grow and expand, and not just create one other rigid system, but we can actually expand it. That's it. That's all. I mean, so just to summarize here, when it comes down to why hasn't the world changed yet, I guess you could say, well, first of all, yeah, it has changed. We're seeing changes. We are seeing things stop happening. But when it comes to the big questions, like why haven't UFOs landed? Why is Trump in power right now? Or why is free energy not out yet? Why are some of these big things that are available? If it's there, why isn't it out? We're not ready, in a lot of ways. It's only gonna create. We're only gonna create what we're ready to see at this moment, and how long we think that takes is our own collective decision. And the way we can speed that up is taking our own action, doing our own work, expanding ourselves, moving beyond things. That's really what this is about. Listening to this podcast is a way for you to start asking yourself questions. When you send it to others, they listen, they ask themselves questions. Some people are going to violently oppose this kind of stuff. That's up to them. But we can meet it with, why is it violently? Why are you so mad at it? What's up with that? Why are you feeling that way about it? You ask questions. And then through that, they explore, why am I mad about it? Why does this piss me off? Is it challenging my accepted version of reality? Oh, okay. Why does that make me mad? And you explore, and the more you explore, the more you understand. That's what this is about. Anywho, that's been this episode. If you ever have any suggestions for content, stuff you want to hear, stuff you want to explore more, reach out. Contact at collective-evolution.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know what you want to see episodes on. We've done a few episodes based on some recommendations, so thank you for that. Rate, review this podcast, send it to others, iTunes, subscribe. Whatever we can do to kind of keep spreading this podcast, get it going, is what it's all about. And if you appreciate the work that we're doing here at Collective Evolution, consider becoming a CE member. As you know, a lot has been changing inside the world of independent media. A lot of halting on a lot of the funding is taking place through a lot of the means by which alternative media had been gaining funding, and now it's very difficult. So we took an initiative to offer a lot of value inside our members area, basically access to a lot of expert interviews and all that sort of stuff that we keep adding every single month, more and new and fresh content, latest, greatest stuff. And by signing up to become a member, you're supporting our work. You're allowing us to keep going, not just with the member content, but with all the public stuff that we're doing. So we need the support. But we're still given more in return, not only more public content, but we're giving you the member content as well, so that you have access to something a little bit deeper there. But yeah, thank you for being part of this community, for listening to the podcast, and for spreading the word. Much appreciated. Take care.